O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 5. Today, we're going to be chatting about whitetail lessons that can be learned from turkey hunting. So get ready for some great turkey stories, some helpful deer hunting tips, and much more. Alrighty, it's a Wednesday afternoon here in Michigan. It's sunny, 50 degrees, and I'm drinking a cold beverage. But most importantly, with me on the line is my good pal, Dan Johnson. How are you, my friend?
Mark, I'm doing pretty good. I also have a cold beverage, and it is also Wednesday here in Iowa.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same day here. That'd make things awful confusing if we weren't. Yeah, I'm a happy guy. I've had a good week. And I've heard that you had a pretty good weekend, too. Is that right?
Yes. How do I put this? I think I heard between 1,000 and 2,000 gobbles this weekend, this last season, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I can't believe how nice the weather was. And this has been one of the most exciting and, best turkey hunting seasons that I've had in a very long time.
That's awesome. I can't say I heard that many gobbles, but it was definitely, I had a good week too. And for the listeners out there, the Iowa turkey season opened last week over by you, right? And the Michigan turkey season for me opened this Monday. So we both have been getting after some of those gobblers. And spoiler alert here, we both did pretty good. That said, I guess I'll kick it off with a quick intro though before we dive in too much. Today, we're talking turkeys, but specifically I wanted to dive into whitetail hunting lessons that can be reinforced or learned while out chasing turkeys. So that's kind of the whole idea of what we want to get at today in the show. But let's take a step back now, and Dan, I really want to hear about how your couple days of turkey hunting with the wife went. Sounds like it went well. You heard a lot of gobbling, but what ended up happening?
Well, I'll give you the short story on my wife's. Okay, so anyway, Friday morning I took off work and I was in the timber and I bumped a couple birds in coming into the blind that I had set up the night before when I got into town. Now, on the way in, the moon was bright, so I didn't even need my headlamp. It's just a gorgeous morning. I bumped 2 birds off the roost that were roosted on the same ridge as me, and for some reason I didn't even care, for the pure fact that I was not at work. So,
yeah.
So sun comes up and the timber literally exploded with gobbles. I mean, every cardinal tweet, every crow, every owl hoot, just one long chain of gobbles running down this giant ridge or this giant valley that I hunt on. It was just perfect. Now, unfortunately, there were no gobbles on this specific ridge that I was hunting on. So I did some calling and waiting. Nothing happened. All right. Fast forward to the next morning. The previous night, I went up and I changed blind positions. The next morning, I head out there with me and my wife. We get out there, and it's dead silent. And I'm just like, no, gosh, this is where all the calling was coming from the previous day.
Right.
So I let out this one soft little calling sequence on this slate call that I had, and I about crapped my pants. The gobble was so close to the blind. My wife was like, what? I'm like, okay, he's
Simmer
close. Yeah, hopefully he didn't see us set up the decoys and set us walk into the blind. He pitched down. He started working his way up the valley, and I was calling to him. Every time he called, he responded, and he worked his way away from us. And then I got real aggressive on a couple calls. He turned around, and he worked his way right back to the right side of the blind. He was hung up, and I just watched him strut out, peeking out the side window of the blind. And, you can't hear him, or you can't see him, but you can hear that boom,
Yep.
boom. Oh, that is one of the coolest sounds in the world. That, and so he worked his way out in front of the decoys, and next thing you know, we're having a photo shoot with my wife and the turkey she just killed.
That's awesome. And was that her first or her second turkey?
Her second turkey. Last year was her first turkey. So she's not into the long afternoon hunts where you kind of bop around a little bit. She's more of a, morning hunt, a lot of activity, watch them fly down, try to call them in. And if they don't come in, then she'd rather, go read Us Weekly somewhere.
Yeah, I think my wife's the same way.
Yeah.
But gosh, when you're talking about just that ridge, like echoing with a chain of gobbles,
Yeah.
there's nothing better than that. I mean, that is just so awesome. For anyone that hasn't turkey hunted, you have to try it out. When you hear those gobbles in the morning, first thing before daylight, and they're just one goes off, and then the next one, and then the next one, it's kind of ricocheting all the way around you. Holy smokes, I get some serious chills.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's there's something about that very first gobble that you hear of the year that you haven't heard it for an entire year. It's almost like you've never been hunting before, turkey hunting before. It's just it's a shock to your senses almost.
I was about to make a bad Madonna joke, but I won't go there.
Anyway,
oh yeah.
So later that afternoon, I went down to a bottom. This bottom that's typically flooded this year. This year it wasn't. I end up hearing a turkey. I move in on him. Nothing happens. I go there the next morning, Sunday morning, and again, the timber just explodes with gobbles. And I'm just like, something's wrong here. Like, why am I getting it this good? Well, the ridge right in front of me, gobble, 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 gobble. I mean, I bet you before he pitched down, he probably gobbled 30 times. And he pitched down one gobble, and I watched him strut out a distance on the ridge. So I stand up, I pack up my decoys, I walk up the ridge to where he was gobbled, and on my way to the ridge, I heard a gobble out in this field. I'm like, he just made a huge mistake, because I had the advantage now to where I could walk up to the fence line. I glassed him. I saw where he was at. I dropped down. I crossed the fence out of his sight. I walked into this cattle pasture, and I found out where he was, and I walked straight to him, but I kept a giant bush in between me and him. So I gained about 50, 60 yards on him. So I was about 150 yards out.
Nice.
I started calling real softly, and he was with another tom and a hen. So I thought, I'm screwed, man. I'm not going to see this. I'm not going to see this tom. Well, he dropped down out of my sight, and I knew he was coming my way. I didn't even set out the decoys. I belly crawled another, I'd say 15 yards through thorns and cow poop to get to another bush that I sat in the shade, and I didn't hear him. And then all of a sudden, boom, I see tail feathers. He takes, how they strut, and then they take those 3 little steps or 4 little steps. So it's like boom, Boom.
Love the sound effects.
Yeah, I could have went to college for sound effects.
That was really your calling.
But I decided to get into marketing instead.
Yeah, big mistake, my friend.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he 2 or 3 steps later, and I'm taking trophy photos.
Gotta love that.
That had to be one of the most exciting hunts I've had for a strategic standpoint in a long time. I really had to make a lot of calls on the fly.
Sounds like. I mean, you were running and gunning and crawling and going through horse or cow poop, and that's a good hunt in anyone's book.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome. Well,
and I heard you were successful too.
Yeah, I was, which is usually not how my turkey hunts go. But I went on a couple nights over the weekend trying to roost some birds back on one of the farms I hunt, and wasn't hearing anything. Nothing was happening. Couldn't hear a single bird, so I was getting a little worried. But opening morning was Monday, so I went back out to kind of one of my old faithful spots, kind of just crossed my fingers hoping for better luck, and got out there, sat down, and sure enough, they started gobbling off the roost where they usually are. So just like you said, that first gobble gets you so pumped up, and it's just like you're back.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're gobbling off the roost, but as they usually do in this spot, they always want to go the other direction, but it's on the neighbor's property, so I can't get over there. So usually what happens is they gobble off the roost, I yelp at them, I cross my fingers and hope they're going to come my way, and then 9 times out of 10 they don't, and that's what happened. But maybe 30 minutes after fly down, I started hearing some more gobbles on the other side of this property, coming from the other direction. So, just some different calls and yelps and whatnot, and slowly that started to get closer and closer. Long story short, it ended up being 2 hens and 2 toms. They kind of strutted across this cornfield in front of me, but I had a small finger of timber between me and this cornfield, and then I was in a little opening in a little food plot area, actually. Well, they crossed the finger of timber, but we're still about 80 yards away, and they strutted and puffed around, and they just wouldn't come in. So that was probably 20 minutes I was working them. They finally went into the timber behind me. They disappeared. And, there'd been a lot of calling. They were gobbling like crazy. I'd been yelping and whatnot. But I wasn't hearing anything but them. But just as they disappeared, maybe just a couple minutes later, I just kind of happened to glance over my left shoulder. And like 10 yards behind me, a tom is walking real quiet, just kind of sneaking right back there behind me. He came in quiet and kind of circled around me before I could, get my gun up or anything. I really couldn't move because he was so close. But he circled out back into this opening about 70 yards away. And at that point, he opened up and started gobbling, saw my decoys, and then it was kind of a, turkey hunting 101, about 15 minutes of him strutting and gobbling and me occasionally yelping and then stopping and calling and trying to make him come in closer. And he finally committed, kind of started running in. And, I actually, the way he was headed, I wasn't going to have an open shot at him unless he kind of came into this one little hole I had, and that was about maybe 45 yards away. So I knew my gun was patterned out to that distance, let her rip, and he dropped right there. So
that's cool.
Opening morning turkey, and I was a happy camper.
Yeah, man, I tell you what, I could sit and watch a turkey strut all day long.
It's awesome. It is. It's just cool. Even, I was bummed because I shot that turkey the first morning within like an hour and a half of the season opening. Like, it was great. Like, I shot him, I was pumped, but literally within like 2 seconds after I pulled that trigger, the next thought in my mind was, dang it, my season's done.
Now what do I do?
Yeah. So that was kind of a bummer. But the good thing is that I am getting my wife into turkey hunting. So I've been out with her the last 2 mornings. And then I've got one of my best friends and my dad coming down to turkey hunt this weekend. So I'm going to be guiding them. So I'm going to kind of get to live vicariously through them for another couple hunts. So that'll be good.
Cool. Yeah, I chatted with your wife last night.
Whoa, Dan.
Yeah, I know. We got something on the side.
Oh, jeez. She's helping you with the website, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And she seemed to be really excited about it. So I hope she gets one.
Yeah, it's I might be, to be honest, I might be more excited than her. It's kind of cool to finally, take her out hunting and let her kind of see why I'm so into it and have her experience that. So I'm really hoping that she enjoys it. Because obviously I love it all so much, and I hope that she can share in that with me. So We'll see. So far, so good.
That's exactly what I told her. I said, don't be surprised if Mark is more excited about killing your first turkey than you are.
Yeah. But so far, I think she's actually more excited than I thought she'd be. Even though I was surprised she wanted to do it in the first place. But then, she went out yesterday morning. Was her first morning out, and it was pretty slow. We just heard a few gobbles. We couldn't hunt for too long because she had to head off to some other things in the morning. But it wasn't a really great morning, so I assumed that she wouldn't want to go for another couple days. And then this morning was supposed to be like in the low 30s, pretty cold. So again, I didn't think she was going to want to go maybe till next week, but she was like, "Hey, are we going in the morning?" And I was like, "Well, it's going to be 32 degrees. It's going to be pretty cold out there." And she's like, "Let's do it." So she's a trooper.
She's a badass.
You got that right. I think there's no better way to put it. I'm constantly impressed by the stuff that she's willing to do or the stuff she puts up with for me, and she's a good catch.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess now that we've got our successful stories out of the way, what I was hoping we could do is kind of talk about maybe some examples from these hunts or other hunts and how some of the things we've experienced or learned while turkey hunting can apply to deer hunting. I think in a lot of different ways, things I've done while out turkey hunting have sharpened my skills as a deer hunter or reinforced something about deer hunting that I need to remember come fall or different things like that. So I want to maybe share a couple examples like that, talk through how maybe what's happened over the past couple of days for us can apply to what's going to happen in November or October, and see if there's any parallels. What do you think about that?
I think that's a good idea. I know there are some similarities and there are some huge differences, obviously.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'll just put it this way. I wish that deer made as much noise as turkeys did when, if I grunted or rattled and call them in like some of these turkeys do. That would be awesome.
Well, do you know what they call that? They call that elk hunting.
Exactly.
That's a whole nother episode. But whenever anybody asks me about elk hunting, it's like turkey hunting on steroids, because you've got a big buck, but it's a big bull coming in, but he's making as much noise as a turkey, but way louder. It's unbelievable. But I agree. There's something about turkeys making all that noise, and if a buck could do that, I'd be getting pretty stoked.
Yeah.
You know what else? You know what else I wish?
What do you wish?
I wish that a deer would make as much noise as a gobbler does, and I wish that a deer had the nose of a turkey. That's what I wish.
Yeah, that's a fact. Man, I tell you what, if a deer didn't have a nose like it does, I'd probably have more bigger bucks on the wall, but so would the rest of the U.S.
Yeah, that's the truth. That's the nose is the downfall for most of us, that's for sure. But how about this for a first lesson learned or parallel between turkeys and deer? And the first one I was going to throw out there was overcalling. I think with turkeys, you can very easily overcall a turkey. I've a lot of things I've read when I was learning about turkey hunting, and now that I've been turkey hunting for about 5 years now, a handful of years, I've seen it myself, is that the temptation is, every time there's a gobble, you want to call right back. And then sometimes you start yelping, and if that turkey doesn't gobble back, you start getting antsy, and you start yelping again, and you're still not hearing anything. We're like, well, maybe if I yelp one more time, then he'll gobble. Do it again. And it's like, I don't know, you just keep going. You keep wanting to hope that the next time you try, he's going to gobble. And I think, and from what I've heard and what I've seen, lots of times when you do that, they wise up to it and they skedaddle out of there. Is that something you've seen while you're out turkey hunting too?
Yeah. I think as far as overcalling is concerned, especially if they're with a hen, just like if a buck is with a doe, number one, it's especially with a buck in rut, you can call all you want. There is very few times, and I mean very few times, that a buck will leave a hot doe to come into a call. You got to make him so angry, and the doe has to be in the right stage of her cycle where, he's either going to come in to fight or he's going to breed. So they got to be in their right mind. Now, what I've noticed is turkey hunting, you call them in, and if they're with a hen will come investigate first, and then they'll see either the decoys or they don't see anything at all. Then they leave, and then the tom leaves.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, at least from my experience, lots of times you can fire up a hen more than the gobbler. You kind of tick off that hen because it's, another suitor for her gobbler. So that even happened opening morning for me. I was doing some yelping, and I had a couple hens just really start doing some aggressive cutting and yelping and stuff. And so I just started mimicking them, and it sounded like they were getting pissed off at me. And I think between all that was what ended up bringing in some of those gobblers too. But yeah, I think another thing, like you mentioned, you're not going to be able to pull a buck off of a hot doe. Another thing I've seen both with turkeys and deer is when you do get a buck to commit. So let's say you see your buck cruising, you hit the grunt tube a couple times, he turns and starts coming towards you. Sometimes people will still call again. And what I found is if that buck's coming in, stop. Don't make any more noise. Don't do anything else. Because if he's moving in your direction, if you grunt again, that might help him pinpoint your location better, and he'll spot you or he'll look right up in the tree or something like that. Or just, again, if he's coming your way, don't risk doing something that might screw it up, spook him, anything like that. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to grunting or rattling or anything. I'm not going to grunt again or call again to a deer once it comes my way unless he stops and turns to go the other direction. If he pauses, I'm waiting. If he kind of starts walking parallel, I'm waiting. I think you can just very easily rub deer the wrong way if you do that too much. But
now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
I have learned that lesson the hard way. One on a 180-inch 12-pointer, and I have footage of it, maybe between 170 and 180 inch 12-pointer.
Jeez.
Where I overcalled, and another one on 160 plus inch 8-pointer. So
you picked some good times.
Yeah. Oh my God. And it was just like and this is what a lot of hunters need to watch. Next time you're out in the timber and you watch deer's body, their body, and it will tell you if they're tense, if they're relaxed, if they're cruising for does, if they're, looking to eat. You can tell their body language. If a deer is standing straight up and his head's perfectly in line and his ears are forward, you know that he has found something and he doesn't like it.
Yep.
Or he's trying to pay attention to it to find out what it is. Now, then you see some of this footage of these guys going, bah, 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 and it doesn't stop the deer. That deer he's dazed off. He's very comfortable. He's not even thinking about a predator at that time in his life. But you watch their body movement, their body motion, and they give a lot of how they're feeling away with what their body looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I can absolutely think of a couple experiences of my own like that. And I think one thing related to that is if you have, or kind of tie that up, I guess, if there's a buck and he's standing, he's tense, like you said, his ears are perked up, he's looking around for something, absolutely do not grunt or make a noise to him at that point, because like you said, he's already on edge. And like I think it was that 8-point you talked about. I think I remember seeing footage of that was it Megatron maybe?
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I remember that. So he was stopped there. I think he caught maybe a little bit of your wind or something like that. Is that right?
Yep, I had an ozonics in the tree, and it was blowing the scent down. So he was catching the ozonics, which the ozonics doesn't make it kind of eliminates the human scent, so to speak. And he walked through it. He noticed the ozonics smell because it gives off a smell. It doesn't give off the human smell. It gives off a smell that's supposed to eliminate the human odor or whatever. He walks through it. Now, after he walked through it, he knew something up on top of the ridge wasn't the way it should be.
Yeah, just something a little off.
Something a little off. So, and he started heading away from me just a bit. I gave one little burp, and he put his head up. He looked right down in the direction. He did not see another deer. He was gone.
Yep.
He was gone.
Yeah, that is, they'll do that. It's kind of funny, while you were telling that story, it made me think of something else. And I actually just posted a video about this same thing, I think yesterday. But this is related to calling too. And it's regarding to the timing of calling, the first time you call, and the wind direction.
Yep.
So typically when I've called to a deer, and I think for most people have seen this, when I call to a deer, especially if it's a mature buck, they're going to want to circle downwind of me, downwind of that noise, to scent check what exactly it is making that commotion. So what happened to me a couple of years ago was I had a nice buck cruising the edge of a swamp about 70 yards away, and I grunted to him several times, and he turned and started coming my direction, but he started circling downwind. And my mistake was that he was already very close to being downwind of me, so he only had to walk another 15 yards or so north to get right into my wind. And, obviously it was easy for him to do that. He did it. He caught my wind and he busted out of there. I think the lesson I learned from that is more often, or if possible, I'm not going to call to a deer unless he's far away from being able to circle to my wind, or hopefully I'll have some kind of barrier on my downwind side. So like a perfect situation would be if maybe I was hunting on a steep ridge and there's like a ravine that drops off behind me, downwind of me. So if a deer tries to circle downwind of me, he'll hit that ridge line or that ravine. He won't be able to continue, and hopefully by then I'll have a shot opportunity at him. But
Yep.
I think the big thing is try to prepare for that, or don't even call if he's already close to being downwind, because there's a chance you might get him to turn and come towards you, but more likely than not, you're just going to pull him into your wind, spook him even more, and that's obviously going to hurt your chances. So I'd almost rather let a deer walk away from me without even trying to call to him, as long as he's not going to get my wind.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit more aggressive of a hunter. So, and after learning all these lessons the hard way, I think that as a deer's, I won't call at a deer if they're stopped. You call until they stop and look in your direction, and then you're done. Then you're done calling. Okay? And it's typically just a grunt, 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 stop, or whatever it takes to get their attention. If you're looking at them and they're looking in your direction, no more calling.
Yeah.
And because here's typically what happens. You're hunting in an area where the deer can see. I mean, their hearing is deadly, their eyesight's better, and their nose is even better yet. So what they'll do is they'll use all three of those together. They'll use their ears to pinpoint where they think that sound came from. They'll use their eyes to see it. And if for some reason they're still interested after they don't think that they know where that sound's coming from, they'll loop way downwind of you to try to catch the scent of it. So, I mean, it's almost a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, it's tough. Wind. I think back to what we were saying. I wish deer had a turkey nose. Speaking of deer using their eyes as that third line of defense or whatever it might be when they're hearing a noise or something, when it comes to deer seeing something after a call, lots of times something that will help a lot is if you have a decoy. And this ties back to one of the lessons that I wanted to bring up regarding turkeys and whitetails, being how important the positioning of decoys is. So for turkeys, I think most people use decoys when they're hunting turkeys. And I found through a lot of trial and error over the past couple of years that some decoy setups work pretty well, some don't. And I've tried a whole bunch of different combinations, and I still don't know if I figure out what the perfect setup is, but I think everyone maybe has a different opinion on that. But when it comes down to it, the positioning does matter. There'll be lots of times where you're calling in a gobbler, he sounds like he's just hot to trot, charging in, and as soon as he sees your decoys, he'll hang up. And I don't know if you've seen this, but he'll hang up and then just strut, just will not commit. And then I've had a situation where I had the exact same thing happen the next day. Nothing else is different, except for I had removed a gobbler. I had a setup with a hen decoy, a jake, and a gobbler, and or full strut gobbler. And the next day I removed the full strut gobbler and just had the jake and the hen, but exactly the same position. The next morning, almost the exact same time, very, very similar type of sequence of this bird came down, heard him gobbling, he comes charging in, comes over the same hill, sees that setup, and came right in. Now I ended up missing that turkey, but that's another story altogether. But yeah, I think that matters a ton in turkey hunting. I'm thinking maybe you've seen something similar.
Yeah. I only take out a hen and a jake.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll just take out a hen. Now a dominant bird will come in to pretty much any setup that you have, whether it's a strutter or not. If you take that strutter out, you're going to get less dominant birds come in. Mm-hmm. Take the jake out, you'll probably get a lot of, the rest of them come in, including, the dominant birds. Because just like bucks, have you ever seen a group of turkeys and only one? There's like a group of maybe 3 toms or 2 toms, only one of them strutting. That's because that strutter has kicked the crap out of the other 2 birds to let them know, listen, that hen's mine.
Yep.
So, and that's why these birds are so aggressive. All they do is fight.
It's pretty crazy. Have you ever had one attack your decoy before?
I have, but it was several years ago. I didn't even know I was so excited that one came in. It came in, and right as it flopped, I shot it.
Yeah. I still haven't had it happen, but I've seen it happen, on videos and stuff, and those turkeys can be pretty nasty. Or I was watching an episode of some TV show the other day, and this, one of the people on camera shot a turkey, and there's 3 toms that came in. One tom gets shot, he flops over dead. The other 2 immediately start pummeling him.
Yep.
They start beating the crap out of him. Second hunter in the blind shoots the second turkey. Second turkey drops down dead. The third turkey starts beating the crap out of the other 2 dead turkeys. It was ridiculous.
That is a natural instinct.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, I found this out from National Geographic's, and it is, I don't know what the scientific name for it is, but it's within a lot of animals to where if they see that the dominant animal is injured, the other males in the group will attack it. So they will then become the dominant animal. I saw it with buffalo. A guy shot a buffalo with a bow, and it created like a stampede of buffalo fights.
Jeez. Where
all these males instantly started fighting with each other to position for dominance, and it was like a second. It was just like the dominant male's dead, and then it was just complete chaos. They couldn't even get in there to recover their animal because the other buffalo were fighting so much. It's the same thing with animals in Africa. Did you know that a male lion, if a male lion breeds to a female, then something happens to that male lion and a new pride leader comes in, that that new I don't know, pride leader will kill all the babies because those are not his bloodline.
Yikes.
Yeah. So nature is crazy, man.
Nature is crazy. And you totally did just go like Nat Geo on us there, which is
I know.
pretty cool.
I know. Sorry, I blacked out. What happened?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's great. Well, back to deer and turkeys.
Back to the real life.
If we have another lion tamer diatribe, we'll have to figure out how to get back to this. But back to decoying really quick here. So we talked about the importance of turkey decoy positioning, and I want to touch really quick on deer decoy positioning. And I don't know, Dan, if you have any experience with this. I just started experimenting with decoying last year. I've wanted to do it for a long time. I've always said, yeah, I'm going to do it, and then I never did. And part of that is because a lot of my hunting was in Michigan, where something like that, an aggressive tactic like a decoy, isn't really going to work on these super heavily pressured deer. But in some of the other states like Iowa or Ohio or Kansas, I've seen and heard of a lot of people having really good luck with that. So last year I finally did give it a shot. And one of the things that really kind of influenced me to finally try it was an article I read by John Dudley. He's a pretty well-known hunting writer and TV show host and stuff. And he was on a podcast for Peterson's Bow Hunting, another great podcast. And he was talking about his whole strategy around decoying. It was a really interesting interview, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's definitely worth listening to because he shares a really crazy story when he's out decoying for deer. I won't kind of steal his thunder here. You'll have to go and listen to that. But the point of that is that he talked about the importance, like the most important thing is making sure your decoy is positioned properly. And from what I've learned and gathered from that is that you want the wind blowing from the decoy to you, and you want the deer, the decoy, in my case, I use a buck decoy with one of his antlers off. It kind of makes him look subdominant. I like that deer decoy, the buck decoy, facing me or slightly quartering to. And so why this is important is that any buck that comes in, sees this deer, like when they hear noise, they want to circle downwind of the decoy. They want to circle downwind of whatever that stimulus is they see to double check it. So he sees the decoy with his eyes. Now he wants to check it with his nose. So he starts to circle downwind of it. And then secondly, lots of times when buck comes into a confrontation with another buck, he likes to come in head on. So by having that deer facing towards you, you're going to get that buck starting to circle in to start facing him. And what this ends up doing is you've got the buck's attention focused on the deer. He starts circling, and that circling motion will put him quartering away or broadside to you, facing away about, if that decoy is about 30 yards away from you, typically that buck is going to circle in maybe 20, 15 yards away from you, looking at the decoy, giving you a perfect shot. So from what I've gathered and what I've tried, that seems to be the best position for a buck decoy. I don't know, Dan, have you had any luck with that? Have you ever tried decoying, or and what I'm talking about crazy?
No, and that's the same thing that I've read. But I don't use decoys because I don't typically hunt field edges.
Yep.
And in the areas that I hunt, if I put a decoy out in front of me, the deer that would be traveling in other directions wouldn't even see it. So I hunt a lot of really thick stuff. So decoying in those type of scenarios really don't pan out. Yeah. Now I've done decoying in the past, but I guess I tried to do it a different way. This is real early in my hunting career where I wasn't as educated about whitetails as I am now.
Okay.
With a doe and estrus scent.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where I kind of started, and then I started learning that, I failed a lot more times than I was successful, and I just decided, I'm not really into decoying anymore. That and carrying in the decoy to these locations where I hunt are really long walks, and I already carry enough crap in as it is.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something. because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Yeah, that can be a serious pain in the butt. I was hunting in southern Ohio last November with my buddy Josh, and he had already killed a buck, so he's filming me now at this point. And it was our last evening. Hadn't been seeing anything. It was the middle of the day. We'd hunted, all day. And I think it was at 1 o'clock. We were feeling kind of down. Hadn't been seeing the activity we wanted. And we were sort of at the end of this very thin finger of cut beans that extended into this thick timber. And I was on this timbered ridge that kind of extended off of that. And we got to thinking, hey, let's go for the kind of swing for the fences. Let's go grab the decoy. So I decided to get down from my stand and hightail it all the way back to our truck, grab the decoy, and bring it all the way back out. And I'm always paranoid that something's going to go wrong. So the whole time I was climbing out of the stand and hiking back to the truck, the whole time I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna walk into a giant buck and spook him. Or when I get back, I'm going to find out that there was a giant right here. The whole time I had all these different ideas running through my head. But finally get the decoy, climb back up in the tree, get in my tree stand, and I turn and look at Josh, and he has this look on his face, just like pure dismay. And I'm like, what? And he says, Mark, there was a giant just cruising the edge. Like he just came through while you're gone. And I can't tell you, it was like I just found out my firstborn child had been killed. Like I was just devastated. My stomach went into my throat. I started shaking. And he gave me like a good 5 seconds of just feeling like I wanted to jump out of the tree stand. And he's like, I'm just kidding. It was awful. But
That's funny.
The one other thing about decoying I'll mention, and before we can move on, is just that timing is really important too. And that kind of relate to what you mentioned too. Decoying can be something that can be high risk, high reward. And lots of times it won't work. Like when I was doing some of it in Ohio, we spooked a lot of does came in, saw that decoy, and then got kind of nervous about it. So it can definitely be risky. But it seems like occasionally when you're trying to swing for the fences during the heat of the rut, like the crazy chasing, when bucks are really, looking to kick some tail, that's the time it might be worth trying. So for anyone out there thinking about decoying, think about that. Like I said, I'll post a link to that article that I think has some solid tips for anyone that's interested in that. And definitely consider the importance of that positioning.
Yeah, and that's something that I think I might try later on, but my hunting properties don't have a lot of wide open. It's like because the whole point of a decoy is to have something see it from a distance and come to it. And I don't, my hunting layouts really don't benefit that.
Yep. It definitely comes down to what kind of circumstances you've got.
Yep, for sure.
How about you, Dan? Anything that's popped into your head while we've been talking about here that you wanted to make sure we mention in regards to some lessons we can take from our turkey hunting adventures?
I think turkey and deer do have some kind of similarity, and this is what I've noticed this weekend as far as how they travel terrain. Now, obviously, a deer uses their nose a lot more than a turkey does, but it seems to me that they're always they're never they're never really exposing themselves to the top of ridges. They're always down off the ridge, so they're not skylined. And you would think as a bird that struts, or a peacock, or any other type of bird that does something colorful or blows up to try to attract a mate, you would want to be seen forever. But I noticed this weekend that these birds, they're still looking out for themselves from a predator standpoint. They're just over a ridge, whether it's one side or the other, and they're never skylining themselves. So that might be, because the bird that I was glassing before I shot it, I noticed that he was down off the tops. He was strutting along the edge, or halfway down this little hill that he was on. And when he came to me, he went to the bottom, but he didn't come straight up to the top. He worked kind of like a diagonal motion up the other little knoll that I was sitting on, and and right at the top when he exposed himself is when I shot him. So and I think deer are the same way. They're never sitting on top of a hill unless they're moving through it. They're never just hanging out there.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I think when you said that, another thing that both turkeys and deer seem to do, right, is they want to take the path of least resistance usually, right? Mm-hmm. I saw it with the turkeys recently. When a turkey's moving through this great big cut cornfield, rather than going up over the big hill, they go through the saddle in between the two hills. Yep. Just like a deer, right? A deer, more often than not, they're relatively lazy when it comes to that. And if they can go through, I don't know, if there's a creek crossing and there's lower banks in one certain section, that's going to be a spot you're more likely to see deer. It's kind of those different funneling areas where more deer are going to want to go through it, like a down fence or anything along those lines can really funnel deer movement. And I think the same thing goes for turkeys. There's actually a spot I'm hopefully going to be turkey hunting this weekend with my dad and my friend, where there's a creek crossing that one of my other friends has seen turkeys notoriously crossing there because it's the only shallow creek crossing. So a similar thing. They're going for the area of least resistance that they can travel through, and then without exposing themselves too much to danger. So yeah, some interesting parallels there.
Yeah. And, I do think that, in my opinion, that would be some of like the most common the biggest common denominator. But, as far as their senses are concerned, being able to, another thing that I kind of noticed, and this is, I'm kind of scatterbrained right here because I'm really excited, but in the right scenarios, these animals, just like a majority of wild animals, their well-being comes first. And the only time some of these animals are even vulnerable is in the breeding seasons,
right?
When they're chasing their lovers, and their patience is so, you ask me to sit in a waiting room for an hour, I would lose my mind. You ask them, but my life doesn't depend on it.
Right.
I've seen bucks come in and just stand in one spot and not move. Not necessarily just bucks, but deer in general. If something doesn't feel right, they will sit there and they have all the patience in the world, because really what is it going to do to them? If they wait a little bit longer, they wait till dark and then go eat?
Right.
Or they say, well, man, I think I'll just take my chance and then get shot.
Yeah, they usually don't do that, do they?
No. I mean, they just stand perfectly still, and they are so observant, whether it's, like you said, a stimulant. If it is a scent, you've already lost that battle, because they typically don't question their nose. You may be able to fool their eyes, and their hearing is, I think, of all the things, I don't know if you were to rate their highest sense, it'd be nose, sight, ear, but together they're all, or what did I say? I said nose, sight, ear. Yeah, nose, sight, ear. I think they're all, when used together, they're unbeatable.
It's a deadly combination.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think I think you bring up a great point here. A big part of the reason why I like to turkey hunt is that I think whenever you're putting yourself up against an animal that has senses like that and a survival instinct like that, it forces you to sharpen yourself as a hunter. It forces you to better understand your prey, to plan ahead, to control yourself in those moments. And whether that's a turkey or a deer, it's constantly making you a better hunter. So I feel like coming out of turkey season, by adding this additional couple weeks of hunting, I really believe that does make me a better deer hunter, because every time you're out there in the woods doing that, putting yourself to the test against a wild animal like that, it forces you to sometimes fail, but to grow from that.
Yeah.
And gosh, I think it helps a lot.
I couldn't agree with you more. And one particular moment is when this turkey season, when I heard that gobble walking up to that ridge, and I knew where he was at. I walked up to the fence line. I glassed him. And my mind, instead of saying, let's go right now, said, stop, observe, make an educated guess, and then make your move. I went over like 3 scenarios in my head on what I could have done to try to get this tom. One was go the opposite ridge, walk the fence line up through another section of timber, and try to call him in. But because I already saw him, I decided to do, to drop down and use that whole bush thing as, use the bush as my disguise.
Right.
So it surprised me, because typically I'm just go. And my lack of patience prior years, whether it's deer hunting, turkey hunting, life in general, has been kind of a fault of mine, because I'm generally an impatient person. So my body or my head maybe subconsciously said, stop what you're doing and just think about this for a second. And I guess I naturally made the right decision, but it surprised me. I was just, whoa, the old me would have been tearing out there doing something stupid. It's like that, why don't we run down there and get one of them cows? And the old bull says, well, why don't we walk down there and get them all?
It's a smart bull.
Yeah.
Yep. That's cool to see that, and to have that self-awareness to recognize when you're kind of progressing as a hunter and as a human, I guess. Even it's kind of neat. I like it's cool looking back and kind of reflecting on who we were in the past as a hunter to where we are now, and I think it's nice to see that all the work we put in and the continuing education we try to go through, it pays off in those ways. So
yep.
Pretty
and
awesome.
that's exciting to watch. Not only others grow, like for my wife, I'm so excited now that she shows an interest in turkey hunting, because it's something that I can share with her. Honestly, don't tell her this, but I don't want to share deer hunting with my wife. That's going to be a Dan Johnson activity, and a Dan Johnson only. Now, when my daughter gets a little older, I'm going to open the door, and if she wants to explore it, I'm gonna take her there. But if she doesn't show interest, I'm not gonna force her to do it. But my wife, she doesn't really show interest in the deer hunting side of it anyway. So I'm not gonna push the envelope, because I do like my personal time by myself in the stand. Turkey hunting's fine, because the success rate you have with turkey hunting is just a little bit greater, and you don't put as much work into a turkey as you do a big buck.
Yeah, it's a little different. I think that's going to be a good topic for us to talk about at another point, though, about hunting with your significant other or getting new people into hunting. I think that's something we could talk a lot about. Yeah. I think for me personally, I wouldn't mind it if I could get Kylie into deer hunting. I think I actually would like it. I do value that alone time and that personal space, and so I would definitely still want that sometimes. But I also just love talking about it so much, and almost all the time it's all I ever talk about. So if she could be equally as excited about that, or even moderately excited about that, that'd make my dinner conversations at least a little more fun.
Yeah, for sure. That's hilarious that you bring that up, because before this podcast, once a week I get to talk to you, and we get to talk about deer hunting, and we get to talk about whatever it is that's on our mind.
Yep.
Now, the other day at the dinner table, I'm sitting here talking to my wife about the scent glands on a deer, on a buck, and how they use them. And she's looking at me like, would you just shut up? Because I don't care about the tarsal glands on a whitetail deer. She's just like, she was just acting like, yeah, okay, like being polite and showing some kind of interest when it was really just going in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, I guess that's payback for when you listen to her talk about the mall, right?
Yeah, or Von Mauer is her guilty pleasure.
Oh, geez, yeah, that's funny stuff. But I don't know, but I think this is probably a decent place to wrap up. There was actually a whole bunch of other things I wanted to talk about, but we, you know how we get. We just start talking about stuff. Yep. Was there anything else you wanted to make sure, though, that we covered in?
I think when it comes to decoying, just know that there are negatives and positives to everything that you use them for, and they are to be seen by the animal, and for that animal to come into your location. If the turkey or the deer can't see them, they're not going to come into it like you hoped. They're, especially if you're calling, they're going to, turkeys typically come straight into the call. A deer will loop around and try to get your scent, but you have to be able to use your experiences from previous, situations to make learn from your mistakes or learn from your successes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we should have a whole episode at some point dedicated to decoying, and maybe get someone in here a little smarter than me and you to talk about decoying, because I think at least I definitely want to learn a lot more about that. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners too, because it's one of those things that it's kind of not a ton of people do it, but the people that do seem to have some exciting stories, at least to tell about when it does work. So we'll have to talk another time.
I know some guys who are dead serious every time they go out. Even mid to early October, they're pulling decoys in, and some guys won't hunt without them. Wow. And I would love to hear their reasoning on why they think they work so good.
Yeah, well, make sure all the listeners tune in later on the Wired to Hunt podcast whenever we talk about decoys. I guess that said, then Dan, let's wrap things up here.
Sounds good.
So, as always, thank you to everyone out there sitting in your car or at work or taking a jog or eating dinner, whatever you're doing and listening to the podcast. We appreciate that. I'm glad that you're listening. And from everyone that has, talked to us so far, that's been listening to the podcast, it sounds like people are enjoying. So that's great. I love to hear that. But if you have any feedback or ideas about things we can be doing differently or things you don't like or things you really like, we'd love to hear about it. So feel free to shoot us an email or a message on Facebook. There's contact information on our website, so you'll figure out how you can get a hold of us. But definitely let us know. We want to make the show even better and make sure it's as helpful and entertaining for you as possible. So get a hold of us. And then also, if you have been enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really appreciate that. It takes just a couple quick seconds, and it helps other whitetail addicts like you find the show. So I think that's definitely a good thing. Finally, then, we would also like to thank our partners who help make this show possible. As always, big thanks to Sitka Gear, Bushnell Optics, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. That said, be sure to visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 5, that's where you're going to find the show notes from today's episode. I'll put links to some of the different things we talked about, and that'll be a quick way for you to kind of follow up on things we've discussed. And then, if you haven't yet, sign up for our Whitetail Fix newsletter. We'll be sending out different updates and news as things come out on Wired to Hunt. So, thanks again, and until next time, have a really, really great week, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.